So you and Maseko have talked a lot about how games can be an assessment to measure
Yes.
children's intelligence and stuff like that. So how can you talk more about that? Because,
Games as assessment, sure. If you think about, and we haven't really spoken about, it's probably critical for this conversation that I talk about what I think a game is.
Okay.
To me, a game is an activity in which any really interesting game is, by definition, challenging. Games are only interesting so long as there's some difficulty or challenge about them. You know, once we learn how to count, Chutes and Ladders is no longer challenging because now we know how to count. Games only remain interesting as long as they keep giving us interesting challenges. So if you think about that, any game is, by definition, an assessment. What challenge did the player encounter and how did they do at it? And so all games are assessments. Game-based assessment is just the matter of coming up with interesting challenges around subject areas that we'd like kids to demonstrate proficiency in, and turning them into games and then just watching how they do with them. I mean, the interesting thing about a game-based assessment is it doesn't, typically assessments are like you learn something and then we test you.
Yeah.
A game-based assessment doesn't have to be that. It doesn't have to be you learned it, now you'll play the game. Playing the game can be the process of learning, and so it becomes an integrated process. The kid is learning something, they're rising to challenges. We know that when you give a kid an interesting challenge, they don't shy away from it the way they shy away from a test. So the kid will sort of rise to the challenge and then they'll perform as best they can. Some will succeed better than others at any particular task. And so therefore, a game-based assessment is really an authentic way, an environment in which kids are not just being assessed, but actually learning.
Yeah. But so the question is more about what kind of things should we measure when it comes to learning progress? So how do you go about measuring?
That's the $1 million question. And I think society, it's ever shifting what it is that we want to value. It is, I think there's a famous saying about the current testing we do is that we value what we can measure rather than we measure what we value. Which means we know it's easy to test a kid on knowledge. Do you remember what year, the year of Indonesian independence? Or do you remember the names of the biggest 4 islands or stuff like that? So we test that because that's easy to test. That doesn't tell us anything about the quality of understanding.
That's just memorizing.
That's right.
That's just memory.
And that's what most tests are.
Yeah, memory.
And we all have experiences frequently of memorizing something for a test and then forgetting it immediately. We sometimes also have the experience of memorizing something and remembering it, and that's usually because we were actually interested in it to begin with.